and then that would be a bit embarrassing. And you now get a message from a nice lady saying, recording in progress. And
yeah. I thought that was Chelsea, but
a little side hustle there.
Yeah, so we are live, guys. We are live, we are recorded, and we're away.
Right, we've got some slides to share with you, and you will get a copy of these after the session today, as well as a link to the recording. So, welcome, everybody. Let me just show you our first slide. So, welcome. So pleased you could take the time to join us for this first of 6 well-being workshop. And we've got 6 themes we're going to cover in these workshops, and they all kind of fit together. And you can also look at them in isolation. They all have really practical and hopefully useful skills for you in the workplace, but also your wider life. This isn't just about you in your working lives. This is about you in your whole life. These are really evidence-based practical skills that can really support you and your well-being. So thanks so much for joining us. Let's just talk a bit about how this will work. As Will said, have a pen and paper handy. It could be useful, but remind you that you will get the slides afterwards. After the session, so you'll get a copy of the slides and a link to the recording. And we'd love to get your questions, insights, and reflections as we go along. So please pop these in the chat. There's a chat box there, and just type them in the chat. And my friend Will monitor that chat, and he'll share your nuggets and your pearls of wisdom, your questions and insights as we go along. And if it would be easier, sometimes we might ask you to leap off mute just to have a chat with us. But in the main, we'll request that you leave your mic on mute just so we can manage the background noise in the workshop. And finally, we ask that you look after yourselves during this time we have together. We will finish by 11 o'clock at the latest. We might finish a little bit before that. And we're not intending to have a break. So if you need to stretch, get yourself a drink, go to the loo, whatever, please just go ahead. You don't need to seek permission. And yeah, we want you to look after yourself and also what you share. We'd love it if you share stuff in the chat about any observations you've got, but also feel free that you can just sit back and observe as well. Now, our topic today is called Noticing, and we gave it a subtitle of Gathering the Scattered Mind and Connecting with Now. And I like to use a bit of a quote just to sort of get us in the mood, to get us, get our minds in the area where we want them to be. And here's a quote from a psychologist called Abraham Maslow. And he said, the ability to be in the present moment is a major component of mental wellness. And ain't that the truth? And what does he mean? Well, this is a theme we're going to come back to, but are you ever sitting with friends or family and your mind is still at work? Your mind is still at work thinking about a difficult experience or a challenging moment or a difficult conversation. That means you're not there with the people who you're interacting with, your friends or your family. And sometimes that can lead us to feel frustrated. It can lead us to not be the person we'd like to be with our friends and family. So this ability to step into the present moment, I'd say, is a really core component of our well-being. And what we hope to do today is present a case to you of why that's useful and how you can do it, basically. Now, before we go any further, we will introduce ourselves. Well, actually, Will, your dear colleague Will, has kindly agreed to introduce us both. So Will, over to you.
Thank you very much. And hello, everyone, and welcome. So for those of you that don't know me, and it might be more the future members of staff watching this video, but I am Will O'Donnell, and I'm one of the behaviour analysts over at West Thames. This is my 8th year with Ambitious About Autism. And in that time, I've worked as a labs, and I've worked as a slabs, and I've worked as a coordinator, as well as my current role. So I have a decent scope of experience in terms of what everyone deals with in their sort of day-to-day. And I have a particular passion and interest in the subject we're discussing today, through the principles of behavioural science and through the work that I do with our learners. And I'm particularly excited to introduce our guest speaker and expert. So Ross McIntosh is an organisational psychologist. His professional focus is cultivating psychological well-being and flexibility in organisations much like ours and the individuals therein, so all you lot. Ross is an honorary visiting lecturer and researcher at City University of London. And Ross and his colleague, Dr. Paul Flaxman, have been developing workplace wellbeing interventions based on acceptance and commitment therapy, otherwise known as acceptance and commitment training, but most commonly known as ACT. So we'll generally refer to it as ACT throughout. Ross is also the host of the world famous podcast, People Soup, where he talks to a variety of expert guests about psychological flexibility in the workplace. So we're in very, very good company today, and it's a real privilege to have someone with Ross's expertise and experience and knowledge. I'm just going to be here as a trusted sidekick, and we're going to explore our well-being and apply this evidence-based practice of ACT to help us nourish our minds and flourish at work. I've been meeting Ross frequently over the last couple of months to put these sessions together and try and make it relevant to our jobs. And in each session, we'll learn a little of the sort of psychological or the behavioural theory behind it all, but then really focusing on some practical skills and techniques to support our well-being at work, but in our everyday lives as well. This can be applied anywhere, no matter where you feel you're at with your own personal well-being, or whether you think you're in a really good place or bad place. We're really just learning mental skills that can be explored and applied wherever. There's vast amounts of research over many years to show the positive effects that ACT has on people. And on a personal level, I use these techniques on a daily basis, and it's been incredibly helpful for me personally. And it's not a one size fits all. There might be parts that you really, really like, parts that you connect with. It's more about creating a toolbox of skills and knowledge that can be applied in many different ways and different styles and different combinations. So I hope that you all get stuck in and you find it helpful and interesting. And as we say, we're going to record all of these for everyone's references. So if you miss one of the sessions or a couple of the sessions, you can go back and sort of build that toolbox even further. And then afterwards, obviously, you'll have the slides as well for reference, and you'll have me. So, obviously, I'm available to you guys if you have any further questions beyond the training, or you just want to talk about ACT, or you want a little bit more guidance or support in that way, then I'm obviously on site as well. So I think we're ready to rock. Ross, back over to you.
Cheers. Well, that's quite an introduction. Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope I can live up to that. And well, you can tell us at the end. We're going to ask you for some feedback at the end. So just for those of you who are curious about the amazing artwork on this slide, these are our self-portraits of ourselves. And I think maybe I've been overly generous to myself, and I think Will's been perhaps overly harsh to himself in that portrait. But yeah, you've seen him in the flesh. I've only ever seen him on the telly. So
I had to give the big ears a little bit of a showing. I think that was my main brief to myself.
Nice one. And it's great that Will was talking about a toolbox, because I see this space this is a space today that we've got till 11 o'clock that we are co-creating. I look at it like a workbench, because spoiler alert, I'm not an expert in being you. I'm not an expert in navigating your life or your role here at Ambitious College. I do, however, have some expertise in behavioral science and how we can make that effective and useful in the workplace. And that's what I'm bringing to the workbench. What I invite you to, if you're willing to and feeling generous, is to bring your own experience to pause, reflect, think, well, could this apply to me? Could this make sense in my world? Or, yeah, that happens to me. So meet us at the workbench to explore, really. And I wanted to start by checking in with you. And we're going to use a feature of Zoom. I don't know whether you'll have come across this, but there's a feature on Zoom where we can do a poll. Sorry, I think I just got muted there. So there's a feature on Zoom where we can do a poll. So you can share your anonymous thoughts. And I've got a poll to share with you right now. And it's asking this question. So the question is, how useful, oh, sorry. That's not the poll I wanted to show you. Do apologize. Can't ask you how useful you found the workshop before you've had the workshop. Right. Here we go. How much do you agree with this statement? I find it easy to stay focused on what's happening in the present moment. Where 5 means you find it really easy to stay focused, and 1 is you find it very difficult to stay focused. So you can select one of those on the screen. Those of you in a group environment, maybe just have a conflab and come up with a number. And I'll leave it open for a bit longer, just for people to lodge their responses, and then I'll share the responses with you as well. Okay. And for those of you who are just joining, a warm welcome. You haven't missed too much. We're just gently easing into the topic, which is about noticing, the skill of noticing. Right, so I'm going to end the poll there. We've had quite a few responses. And I'm going to show you the results. So there we have it. In response to this question, we had 57% saying reasonably, moderately easy to stay focused. They chose a number 3, and 2% saying it was a bit more difficult to stay focused. That's 43%.
Sorry guys, we have a mic on somewhere. Can you just double check your mics? Sorry, Ross, I may have just muted you again. I think the other mic's off. Okay, cool.
Great. Right, so yeah, there's the results. So I guess what I draw from that is that it isn't easy. It isn't always easy to stay focused on the present moment. There's lots of distractions in our lives, whether it's distractions external to us, whether it's distractions like our mobile phones pinging, or our other stimulus in our environment, but there's also stuff going on in our heads that can distract us and hook us off and take us somewhere else. So I'll stop sharing that just for the moment. And yeah, thanks for joining in the poll. So that's our starting point, just checking in with you to see how easy you find it to stay focused on what's happening. And what we aim to do is to share with you some really quite simple skills that can help you cultivate this ability to step into that present moment when it will be useful. So to continue on this exploration with you, I invite you to think of an example in your life, and this is any area of life, whether you're at work or whether you're outside of work, something you do in life on autopilot. And what do I mean by autopilot? I mean, when my body is here in this little, I'm in a little cupboard, by the way. It's a little booth in a co-working space, in case you're wondering what this weird green background is. But yeah, my body is here. But what if my mind was somewhere else? What if my mind was thinking about other things going on in my life? So that's what I mean by autopilot. So I wonder if anyone's willing to share in the chat something that they do in their life on autopilot.
Just while people are maybe logging into the chat and typing that up. For me, when I was having a little think about this, I really realized that when I'm traveling on my own, I can be on such autopilot that either the journey could absolutely disappear away from me, and your mind's literally wandering, thinking about work, thinking about what's coming next, thinking about all these different things, and I just haven't noticed a thing around me for the whole journey, particularly on like a bus, a train. Sometimes go for a walk, and then suddenly you're at your destination. You just wonder how you got there. We now have a few things coming through on chat, and yeah, we have driving to work, commuting, washing dishes. Morning routine. Oh yeah, morning routine is a good one. I mean, I don't wake up until sort of second cup of coffee, 10:30 a.m. anyway. So that morning routine. Traveling on the train, cycle to and from work. Yeah, I mean, I sometimes do cycle on autopilot. You've got to get in the present with that, because there's some dangers around. Nice.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for sharing that, because there's a few things I want to point out about that, because that autopilot can be quite useful. And I don't know, someone mentioned driving to work, and I guess that's a regular journey for you. But isn't it quite fascinating that we can operate this piece of complex machinery on busy roads, and we can do that on autopilot? I don't know if those of you who drive remember when you first sat behind the wheel of a car, the steering wheel of a car, and you were thinking, oh God, there's a wheel, there's pedals, there's a gear stick, there's levers, there's mirrors, there's other road users. How the hell am I ever going to be able to control this piece of machinery and get from A to B? Whereas now you can rock up to work and you don't notice the landmarks you pass along the way or anything really. And that just shows that this autopilot can be quite useful to us, but it also can overreach itself. Someone mentioned washing dishes, the morning routine, cycling to work.
And on that note, Ross, we've also just had a chat come through saying sometimes a whole day and every day can just feel like autopilot.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, because isn't that the truth? I'm a freelancer now, but I was a civil servant for many years, and some periods of that career, I loved doing that, but sometimes some periods of that career, I felt like I was more or less on autopilot, turning up, kind of checking in my soul or my brain at the door, and not being that engaged, to be absolutely honest. So I think that there's times when it's useful, because without autopilot, we wouldn't have great art or music or dance or architecture. We wouldn't have all this creativity if we didn't allow our minds to wander. However, sometimes it can overreach itself, and I want to just reflect on that with you. So let's ask the other angle of that. What do you do in your life with more awareness? What do you do where you're really noticing every detail, the awareness is going on, and you're really in the moment? What do you do in your life where that's the case, whether it's at work or your life outside of work?
And funny you should mention art and music, Ross, because for me, yeah, playing, sitting and playing guitar, playing music, that kind of thing, that's just completely all encompassing. Then you feel like you're totally in the zone. We have exercise being one of the first things that's popped up, yoga, supporting learners and working with our learners. Praying, cycling, walking, reading, crochet, exercise, cooking a new recipe, building flat pack furniture. We have cooking.
Brilliant.
Again. Yeah, great.
Oh, brilliant, folks. What a brilliant range of stuff you've shared. So they're the moments where you're really in the detail, noticing what's going on, noticing ingredients, noticing your posture in yoga, all sorts of stuff. So that's great. And it's really interesting to notice the difference. And as someone said, perhaps autopilot for long periods, even days. That's what we really want to address in this workshop, and give you practical skills to enable you to, when it would be useful to you, to step out of autopilot. So here's our agenda for the rest of the session. I'm going to build on what we've done already and try to present a case to you of why this connecting with the present moment is useful. And then we're going to look at different ways we can connect with the moment and build this skill. And we're going to have a go at some of those. And if I invite you to have a go at something with me and Will, then it is just that. It's an invitation. So if you think, oh, actually, this isn't the time for me to practice this, that's fine. You can sit it out and maybe even just let your mind wander. But if you do want to have a go, that would be great, because then we can hopefully hear a bit about your experience and how you found it. Now, all the skills we're going to talk about in these workshops are based on that approach, particular approach to well-being. And it's a really strong evidence-based approach called acceptance and commitment training or therapy. But you don't need to worry that much about fancy names like that, because what we've distilled it down to is these practical skills. And I just want to present these to you briefly to sort of give you a handle on where we're going. So the first skill is that strengthening awareness. Sometimes we don't notice what's going on around us. We can be stuck inside our heads. And maybe we don't notice how we are showing up. And by showing up, I mean, notice how we're being with our friends, our family, our work colleagues, our learners. And we're not realizing the impact we have. So that can be a really useful skill to have. A skill we'll come on to this afternoon is called active. And this is about really tapping into our personal values, what has resonance and meaning for us as human beings, those deeply personal and freely chosen values. And we'll be exploring that this afternoon. So if you do want to come along to that, that's at 1:30. And then finally, this will be one of our workshops next week. There's a skill about how we relate to our inner world. And by inner world, I don't mean anything woo-woo. I mean just that space between our ears, our mind. Our mind can produce a heck of a lot of content. And that content can sometimes be useful. And sometimes that content stops us being the person we'd like to be. It limits us. It restricts us. It can cause us to feel stuck in a rut or frustrated or depressed. So they're the three skills we're going to focus on over the course of these 6 workshops. And the one I really want to focus on today is the noticing one, that top one. And just before I go on, just to know that these skills combine when we can practice them, share them, learn a bit more about them. When we apply them in our lives, whether it's work or outside of work, the evidence shows that they really enhance our psychological well-being, which is a really important thing, particularly with yourselves in your demanding and challenging roles. This is a really important thing. And it's also, as we've said already, it's really useful for you and me in every area of our lives. So we're going to dive into noticing. And I want to kind of continue to build my proposal to you, my argument to you as to why this is so important, because there were 2 fellows in America and they did an experiment where they had this fancy phone technology where they checked in with people regularly throughout the day. They kind of got an alert and they checked in with people, and the people had to say where their mind was at and how they were feeling. And this is taken from the actual academic paper. I wanted to show you this first as a way in. And this is from the paper. And this is what they said. And I'm going to try and translate this afterwards as well. But they said, we developed a smartphone technology to sample people's ongoing thoughts, feelings, and actions. And they found 2 key things. People are thinking about what is not happening almost as often as they are thinking about what is happening. And they found that doing this typically makes them unhappy. So what does that mean? Let's unpick that a bit. Let's unpick that a bit further, but hopefully make it more accessible. Because what they were saying, Killingsworth and Gilbert, and they were at Harvard, what they were saying is that people spend around 47% of their waking hours thinking about something other than what they're doing. So their mind is wandering, and this mind wandering typically makes them unhappy. And this, I've read this paper many times, and it astounds me that we can spend 47% of our waking hours where our mind is wandering. We might be going into the future. Our minds have this capacity to time travel, which can be useful. It can be useful if we're planning or project managing or look into the future. But it can also get a bit much. We can, if you're anything like me, I've got a mind that is quite an anxious mind. And my mind is also a catastrophizing mind. I could represent the nation at the catastrophizing Olympics. I'm really good at it. And yeah, so my mind can wander into the future, and my mind can dwell on the past. Like, oh, goodness me, that meeting went really badly, or oh gosh, I don't think I made a very good impression in that workshop. Whatever, I can spend time dwelling on the past. And I can spend quite a lot of time either in the future or in the past. And that's not good for me. That's not good for my well-being. And that mind wandering makes me typically unhappy. And this research showed it makes others unhappy. So I don't know if that resonates with anyone, that idea that our minds are time travelers.
Cool, Ross, we do have one message in the chat saying, my mind wanders even when I'm asleep. So in terms of potentially having that anxious anxiety experience or the dwelling experience, yeah, even in our dreams.
Yeah.
Will, sorry, can I say something about that, Ross?
Yes, of course.
I did not know that was happening until I was put a monitor. A monitor was put on me because I was told that my blood pressure was always high. So they put that, and I had it on me for 2 days. And when they checked it, it was sometime in the middle of the night, in the morning, and they were asking, what were you doing here? I said, I was sleeping. They said, your blood pressure is high. What were you thinking about? So that's why I say that even whilst in sleep, you still think. So they said there must be something that I was worrying about and unconsciously maybe thinking about it whilst I was asleep. So yeah, your blood pressure, your thoughts can still wander whilst you're asleep, especially when you have something troubling you're thinking about.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. I really, really appreciate that. It just shows the impact of this wandering mind, the physical impact on Nikiri's blood pressure. So goodness me. Yeah, and Will mentioned my colleague, Dr. Paul Flaxman at City University of London, and he's doing research now similar to that, where we're monitoring people's blood pressure for a number of days, and using a heart rate monitor as well. So yeah, our minds can have a dramatic, enormous impact on our bodies. So hopefully me and Will and Nikiru are building this case to say, this is important. This is important to develop this skill of noticing. So let me kind of finish building my argument. So stepping into the present moment. I always like to say, so what?
You can do maths.
So what? What does that mean for us? So recent research suggests that paying attention to the present moment can help us be more resilient during stressful times. can help us focus our attention. Do you ever feel like you're trying to focus on one thing and your mind gets hooked away onto other stuff? It can help us have more compassion for other people. It can decrease inflammation in our body and improve our health, and it can improve our longevity markers. Now, what does that mean? Longevity markers, they are indicators in our body, things we can measure in our body that typically can indicate how long we will live. So it improves those. So paying attention to the present moment has its wins for us. And I'd also suggest that by enhancing our noticing skills, we can notice more effectively what's going on around us, what's going on inside our minds, and how we're showing up in the world, how we're being. Because sometimes we don't realize the impact we're having on other people or ourselves as we navigate our way through the complexities of life. So that's kind of my case, the case we've built to hopefully maybe convince you, or maybe just provoke some thought for you about how maybe this could be useful. And now to kind of shift us onto, well, thinking, well, how the heck can we develop these skills to connect with the present moment? And I'd like to invite you, if you fancy it, to join me in an exercise. And for this exercise, you just need a pen. And it's kind of a fun exercise. I don't get out much, so you might not find it that fun, but I think it can be reasonably fun. And for this exercise, you need a pen or a pencil, or failing that, an object. A small object, preferably not one of your colleagues, just something inanimate that you can hold in your hand. Because I want to invite you to do a bit of an odd exercise with me, but it does have a really, really important point. Because what we're going to do, I'm going to invite you to join me in exploring your pen. I'm going to assume you've got a pen. If you've got a different object, that's fine. I'm going to assume it's a pen. Explore your pen with your 5 senses. So here we go. So let's start with the sense of touch. Just touch your pen. Just feel what it feels like with your fingers. Notice the different textures. Can you notice the different materials your pen is made of? Which is the pointy end, which is the writing end, which is the other end? And perhaps even just hold it in your palm of your hand like that and notice the weight of your pen. Just bringing curiosity to this everyday object, bringing our curiosity to this everyday object, and give it almost looking at it as if it's the first time we've ever seen anything of the sort. Like an alien just landed and the first thing we see is this pen. So let's try having a look at it. Look at it from, maybe hold it up to the light. See how your pen catches the light on the surfaces. Is there any writing on your pen? Perhaps you've got a promotional pen. Is there a hole in your pen? Have a look at it from different angles. See how it looks if you look straight down the point, or maybe the other end. What are the colors of your pen? Now, some of the senses, when we explore this pen in the real world, you have to know where your pen's been to play with the rest of this exercise, I'd suggest. Have a sniff of your pen if you're willing to. You don't have to. Is there any particular smell you associate with that pen? Perhaps there's a sort of, I think I'm getting a sort of vague plasticky smell of mine. And also, unsurprisingly, a bit of hand sanitizer as well. I think I'm getting on there. Sound like a wine expert. Not. What about the sense of hearing? Put your pen near your ear and maybe just tap it. Or if you've got a pen that clicks, click it. How would you describe that sound? What's that like? What's the quality of that sound? And then finally, taste. Now again, you need to know where your pen's been to have a go at that. But if you do want to give it a go, just pop the pen in your mouth and see if there's any taste there. Okay. And then finally, last part of this part of the exercise is to write down a word on a bit of paper, any word that comes to your mind. Right, I've done that. And that's the first part of the exercise. We were exploring that pen with our 5 senses in the real world, the outer world. Now, what I invite you to do is to put that pen away. Just put it out of sight at the moment. Because what I'd invite you to do now is, if it's comfortable for you and wherever you are, either just let your eyes close or just let your eyes go a bit unfocused on whatever's in front of you. So I want to see if we can imagine that pen now without it being there. So what did it feel like between your fingertips? Can you recreate how that felt in your mind's eye? Feeling the different textures, perhaps any raised areas, the different materials the pen was made of, how that pointy end felt, how long was the pen, how did it look? Remember when you held it up to the light, looked at the different textures, maybe looked at any writing on the pen. What did it look like from the unusual angles when you were looking down the pointy end of the pen? What was the shape of it? Can you recall what it smelled like, if there was any smell associated with your pen? Recreating that in your mind. And what about when you held it near your ear and gave it a tap or a click? What was that sound like? Can you recall that now? Can you kind of replay it? And then finally, if you did have a go, what did it taste like? Any particular taste of your pen? And then there's a last thing. Take your imaginary pen and grab a piece of an imaginary paper and write down another word in your imagination, a different word to the word you wrote on the piece of paper. So with your imaginary pen on an imaginary piece of paper, write down a different word. And then if you've had your eyes closed or unfocused, come back and join us in the room, if you will. Thanks for having a go at that with us. Really appreciate that. It might seem a bit weird, but I do have really important points to make about that. We're looking at the outer world experience of exploring something with our 5 senses. And then we had to go at recreating it. Anyone got any feedback or reflections on what was that like as an experience?
So Ross, I found that quite interesting, because I've been using the same style and model of pen for years, and I never actually realized that on the clip that this little metal bit's actually cold. I also haven't tasted my pen, but My second word was just taste, because I don't know what taste that was, but I could certainly taste something. In the chat, we've got, I can smell gel on mine, and it's very strong to chew. We've got someone feeling now quite attached to their pen. And we've also got someone who, despite being late to the party, is already agreeing with what you're saying, Ross.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us. Yeah, because isn't it interesting how we can have a world going on between our ears we can recreate that pen, maybe not perfectly, but quite often we treat that stuff that's going on between our ears that we are creating there as reality, and that can impact on how we behave. And those words we wrote down, I wrote down the word you see at the top of my sheet, boot. I wrote down the word boot. And anyone could walk past and see that word on my bit of paper. But no one can see the word that I wrote on my imaginary piece of paper with my imaginary pen. And quite often, this is an interesting point, but quite often I think we behave as if everyone can see our inner world, or everyone is experiencing the same inner world that we are. And by gum, we're not. Everyone's inner experience is completely different, and goodness me, it makes you wonder how we can ever communicate with each other or maintain relationships. But we've got this inner world going on that's different for all of us. And so sometimes we can treat it as reality, but it isn't. We need to be out there noticing what's going on. So that's why we play with that funny little exercise to hopefully just illustrate that difference between the inner world, what's going on between my ears, and the outer world, what's going on in reality. So how can we develop this skill of getting more skilled at this skill of noticing? Because it is something that can be developed. It's not something we're born with and then it stays static. This is something we can take action to develop, which is good news for us. We can notice the world around us. This is a really wonderful way to develop this skill. So when you are driving to work, when you are washing the dishes, when you are on your morning routine, whether you're cycling, try noticing the world around you rather than being on autopilot. This is a great way to practice this skill, and it's not adding anything more to your day. It's just approaching a part of your day with a different mindset, if you like. So if you're in the shower, for example, don't know about you, but sometimes when I'm in the shower, my mind's already at work, thinking about, oh gosh, what have I got on today? What else do I need to fit in? Need to get the dog food, etc., etc. But there's a whole sensory experience I could be noticing, that the temperature of the water, the noise, the smell of the soap, the water on my skin, and I'm missing out on that. And this is a great way to develop and enhance the skill of noticing. So I don't know if anyone can think of other ways they can notice, because there's a whole world around us. There's a room you're in now. There's nature. There's all sorts going on where we can really connect with the moment through our senses and through our body.
And I agree, Ross, actually, having tried to practice this skill, that I only realized a couple of years ago how badly my mind was off in the wonder world. So I've it's taken a lot of work to practice this skill for me, and I think the shower is a great place to start. Any sort of naturally reinforcing environments. So, people were talking a lot about doing their exercise and walking in nature and all that kind of stuff. And I think going and doing things in sort of beautiful environments does make it easier to practice the skill whilst you're doing it. But I also wanted to note here that, NK's just said on the chat that I'm now trying to notice the body language of my colleagues. And that really comes on sort of nicely to what I wanted to say about this, in that actually by practicing this skill and doing it more and more, it makes you more effective at responding to your environment. And as much as this is about your overall well-being in life, actually at work, it makes you far more effective at your job. You know, our work is about noticing what our learners are doing and noticing what our colleagues are doing, noticing the environment so that we can respond to it. And I think it's a really good skill for people that do our job to actually practice, as well as just making you calmer and making you sort of connect to what your colleagues are saying and that interaction. We have a few more things coming up on the chat now. Moving around the world using the vestibular system can also help us notice the world around us. So that's come from our occupational therapist over at Canal. So yeah, that sort of that balance and that feeling, the space, I guess the proprioceptive stuff comes into it too, where you're literally noticing the space that you're in, and you know the way that you balance on a chair differently to the way that you balance on your feet, for example, or if you're on a boat, or that kind of extra sense as well.
Lovely. And it's interesting, Will, that you're talking about nature, because there's loads of evidence to show that connecting with nature is a really great way to develop the skill of noticing, but it's also really healthy for us. We evolved in nature as human beings, and if we can, as we're out on a walk or looking out of a window, I know you've got several campuses there, so I guess I saw some trees outside the window yesterday when I was chatting with Will. So just noticing the trees out of the window can be really beneficial in kind of resetting our clock to bring us back to the present moment, because that tree exists in the present moment. It can take us away from that mind wandering. And there's a recognized technique that you may have heard of that's particularly useful for those moments when we're feeling perhaps overwhelmed or really stressed in the day. And it's got a variety of names, but I tend to call it 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And it's just a great way to, it's kind of a new habit to develop. Can we pause if we notice perhaps we're feeling a bit overwhelmed or we're in distress? Can we pause and acknowledge 5 things we can see around us? In fact, maybe, should we try this? Yeah, let's try it. I just want to give you a brief experience of this. So 5 things you can see around you. Just bring your curiosity to what's around you. 4 things you can touch around you. There's some prompts here. It could be your hair, a pillow, or the ground under your feet. I'm not sure we've got anyone in bed, but some of you might notice, oh, I'm sitting on a gym ball. Some of you may notice that sensation. You could touch that. I can touch the desk I'm sitting at, the chair, the texture of the chair. The texture of the wall, in fact. I've got sort of felt walls here. It feels like a bit like a snooker table. What about 3 things you can hear? It's fascinating just to bring our attention to what we can hear. I'm just going to leave another silence now, because you might hear things at my end. I'm just going to put myself on mute, actually. And I kind of surprised myself there, because I can hear a chap talking outside on his phone. I could hear the lift door opening. I can hear some sort of hum of some sort of air conditioning or heating system. Hear someone walking past. So some sounds will sound a bit constant. Some might arise and then go. What about 2 things you can smell? Going back to a pen or a pencil. maybe fabric conditioner on your clothes. Anything you can do there. And then the one is one thing you can taste. Might be the cold cup of coffee I'm currently drinking. Might be the glass of water. Anything like that. And this is a really useful technique, folks. And I would say, if you're in a hurry, maybe there's one sense that particularly resonates with you. I tend to, if I'm kind of in a hurry, I'll just bring my attention to what I can hear. And that's a great way to connect with the present moment. If I'm feeling a bit like a headless chicken, thinking, oh, my day's going a bit pear-shaped, everything's collapsing around me, I will just take a pause, take a breath, and just listen to what I can hear. I can now hear a hand dryer, for instance, and a door being unlocked. So maybe there's a particular sense that resonates with you that it can help connect you back to the present moment, rather than being stuck in the sort of whirlwind, the washing machine experience of your mind. Does anyone have a preferred sense that they might tend to call upon?
I definitely go for the look and listen approach, mainly because my mind is boggled every time I do it, and that I didn't realize that all of these noises are happening and all of these things are there. I mean, I was just looking out the window and noticed a really nice, going back to trees, but a really nice tree with these red leaves. Never noticed it. I've lived here 2 years and I've just noticed it looking out the window. And you know, the humming of the fridge, which I know someone's put in the chat as well, that you know, you just don't notice. It's just that background noise. We've also got in the chat people clicking their mouse, the smell of perfume, taste of mouthwash on the tongue. And yeah, closing my eyes and listening makes me focus. And yeah, I think that's the key to it. And actually, you know, sometimes I'll even do it with a piece of music rather than, you know, just sort of singing along, which is my maybe my go-to. If you actually sit and listen and pick out, oh, there's the drum, there's the bass, there's the trumpet, you can do it with a piece of music, or you can do it with the sort of the life's music around you, if you will, and you start picking up on more and more things, and your hearing sort of goes to a further distance. Suddenly you can hear the cars on the motorway that, you know, there's a few streets down, and that kind of thing. Does anyone else want to maybe share any specific senses that they're connecting to or that resonates? Nothing coming through on the chat just yet, but we shall see.
Okay. So what I'd like you to go away with is either using this exercise, a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or just thinking, are there a couple of senses that really work for you? I love it that Will's just noticed a tree with red leaves outside his window. And if you're in a more city type environment, look at the different perspectives you can get on the city. If you're walking, look up. I think we miss so much when we're walking around cities by not looking up and seeing, what do the upper floors of this building look like? The ground floor might be a shop, but what does it look like above? Or what can you see from where you are that perhaps you're surprised you can see? Like, oh, didn't know I could see St. Paul's from here, or the Shard, or whatever it might be. By the way, I can't see that from Brighton, just to be clear, that's where I am. But I know when I'm in London, sometimes you think, oh, didn't know I could see that from here. So yeah, really.
Do now have someone's also sort of same as me saying sight and sound is always their key. We've got someone talking about touch, having something in your hands to ground yourself. And I mean, you know, in our job, how many of our learners do we work with that the fidget toy is the thing that helps them sort of refocus on the present? Which is, you know, is another note for us to think about. How can we engage these skills for our learners? And that's really what a fidget toy is. It's getting into the present and looking and feeling something. We have another message just going for sound, listening to the wind, the trees blow in the wind.
Oh, beautiful.
I walk most morning and sit watching ducks. Oh yeah, going for a river walk. Like, I refuse to live further than, say, 15 minutes walk from the river for the rest of my life, because the difference of coming back from a difficult day at work, or any day at work, and going and having a walk by the river, just having those 10 minutes to watch the sun hitting the water and glistening, the ducks and the birds flying around, all of the sounds and the smells and the sights that come through on river walks is incredible. I thoroughly recommend.
Yeah, and there's all sorts to notice.
And we also have just observing breath. So, obviously a very common practice in just observing your own breath and feeling your own breath in sort of that meditative way. Oh, and I've got going dancing and feeling your body in the music. It's Ross, it's kicking off now on the chat. It's happening. Being underwater helps me, the blocking out of my ears and maybe the sensory feeling of the pressure in the water. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, I love the one of going dancing, responding to the music, water, all sorts of ways we can do this that doesn't necessarily add anything to our day. It's something we might already be doing, but it's just a great way to practice this skill. Because the more we practice it, the better we'll be able to respond when life gets tougher and when we want to focus, perhaps. There's another technique I'd like to share, and we kind of touched upon it already when we were playing with our pens, and it's called beginner's mind. This is actually a thing, beginner's mind. It's been researched, and it's the skill of experiencing something as if you've never done it or seen it before, bringing a fresh pair of eyes to something and thinking, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are you feeling? And you're paying attention to stuff without any preconceptions or presupposed ideas about how this is going to be. And they say it's like wiping off a dirty windshield. You can see things you are missing in your life in real time, as opposed to how your mind has predetermined them to be. And I think this technique is just so powerful. How often do we go into a conversation, perhaps with a preconception about how this person is, and perhaps already judging what they're going to say as a bit daft, perhaps, or not very useful? When actually, if we go in with the beginner's mind, we might be able to really tune into what they're saying. So it's a really useful thing. It takes a bit of conscious effort to think, right, I'm going to go into this with beginner's mind and kind of clearing that windscreen so you can see clearly without the clutter of how you imagine it's going to be waving in front of your eyes. So I'd really recommend you just giving that a go. There's not that much more to say about it, to be honest. It's just consciously bringing that fresh set of eyes and senses to an experience. And I've got one more technique, way to build this skill that I'd like to share with you. And that's called mindfulness. And it might be quite controversial to you. I don't know what pops up for you when you hear the word mindfulness, because it's a great way to practice connecting with the present moment. And I think it's become so enormously popular, it's almost been damaged by its own popularity. I think there are people out there peddling this that aren't being very helpful. People are peddling it in a way that isn't helpful to the reputation of mindfulness or the usefulness of mindfulness. So I'm almost asking you to bring beginner's mind to this experience of mindfulness. Some of you may have your own practice. Some of you may already practice mindfulness, perhaps with there's some really great apps out there. Some of you may have been like, what's this all about? So I wanted to just give you my definition of mindfulness, what I consider mindfulness to be. And then maybe we'll touch upon a few of the alternatives. So what I consider mindfulness to be is It's a form of mental training. You might engage in physical activity to look after or maintain your body. So maybe you do some light stretching. Maybe you go running. Maybe you go cycling. Maybe you go to the gym. Whatever you do that to look after your body a bit. But do we pay as much attention to our minds, to our mental well-being? Mindfulness to me can be like waking up from autopilot. It's like a way that we can train ourselves, develop this skill to wake up from autopilot. Notice when our minds are off somewhere and bring it back. And it's a way to gather the scattered mind. I love this phrase, the scattered mind. Because I don't know about you, but sometimes my mind can be all over the shop. I might be trying to work on one document, but then an email pops up and I go, oh, what's that? So I have a look at the email and I go, oh, sugar, I haven't done that. And then I start thinking about other stuff I haven't done. In a few seconds, I'm way away from focusing on what I want to focus on. So aside from it not being good practice to have my email open when I want to focus on something, this skill can help us gather the scattered mind. So mindfulness is a way to practice this. And let's try and just maybe surface a few of those myths too about mindfulness. Because it's for me, it's not about imagining a calm mill pond. We don't have to wear orange robes and become a Buddhist to practice this. This is totally non-religious. Some of the techniques are taken from a foundation in Buddhism, but it's not a religious act. It's a really practical mental training act. Does anyone have any views on mindfulness or their own practice or myths you'd like to discuss? Do you think, oh, it's not for me, or oh, it's all a bit new age or tree huggy?
We do have one message just saying, yeah, simply put, it makes you aware of your environment and the things around you, and helps you focus on things that you need to focus on and take your mind off the things that stress you.
Brilliant. Yeah. Love that. Thank you. So, folks, wanted to invite you, if you fancy it, to join me in what they call a guided practice. A guided meditation. So if you fancy it, I'm going to have a go at guiding you through a meditation. It will take about 8 minutes or so. And like I said before, this is an invitation. If you don't fancy doing this, that's fine. If you just let your mind wander and relax. But if you want to have a go, please do join me. And as best you can, follow my my guidance. So the type of posture we invite you to adopt, we call a dignified posture. So wherever you're sitting, whether it's on a gym ball or a chair or a kitchen chair or a bed, whatever it is, see if you can feet flat on the ground, your legs about a hips width apart, hands resting on your thighs, palms up or palms down, your back as upright as is comfortable for you, and your head upright too, without straining. And depending on where you are, you might feel comfortable allowing your eyes to close, or you might just prefer just to let your gaze go unfocused. Whatever it is, just adopt that posture. Now imagine that your attention is like a spotlight that's directed onto your body. And take that down the body. Take that right down, until the spotlight reaches your feet. Noticing the sensations there. Maybe a particular temperature, maybe an itch, maybe an ache, or maybe nothing. We're not looking to create anything. We're just looking to notice what's there for us right now in this moment in our body. And if your mind's anything like mine, you might find it's wandered off. It's gone somewhere else. And that's okay. Just know that that's normal. That's what human minds do. And if you do notice it's gone off somewhere, see if you can notice where it went. And then gently, yet firmly, bring it back to the body. And we're currently just bringing our curiosity to the feet. And on the next in-breath, just expanding that spotlight of attention to take in the legs up to the knees and then all the way up to the pelvis. Now, perhaps you can notice the points where you're in contact with whatever you're sitting on. Maybe the backs of your legs, or your lower back. Perhaps you can notice the sensation of clothing against your skin. Just bringing curiosity. And on the next in-breath, just expanding that spotlight of attention once more to take in the chest, all the way up to the shoulders, and the back as well. Maybe noticing sensations on the surface of the skin or deep inside. Allowing the attention to spill down each arm, the left arm and the right arm. Right to the fingertips, perhaps noticing the sensation of air around your hands or your fingers. And on the next in-breath, just expanding the spotlight again to take in the neck, the muscles of the neck, perhaps noticing any tension there. Not looking to fix it or judge it or label it. Just looking to notice what's there for you right now. The scalp, the muscles of the forehead, around the eyes, around the nose and the mouth and the jaw. Perhaps noticing the expression on the face. And now, as best we can, holding the whole body in our attention. And then just letting the attention on the whole body fade into the background, dissolve away. And bring that spotlight, focus it in, and bring it to the tummy. Bring that spotlight of attention to the tummy and that inward and outward movement of the tummy with each breath. Notice the way those muscles expand and contract. Not looking to change the way we breathe at all, just letting the breath breathe itself. But as best you can, just noticing that inward and outward movement of the tummy with each breath. Perhaps noticing that tiny pause between each inward and outward breath. And again, if your mind's anything like mine, you might find it's wandered off. It's gone somewhere else. And if you do notice it's gone off somewhere, first of all, know that that's entirely normal. You're not broken. You don't need fixing. But if you do notice your mind's gone somewhere, see if you can notice where it went and then gently yet firmly bring it back to the tummy and that inward and outward movement, just letting the breath breathe itself. And it may happen more than once. And if you do notice it goes off somewhere, again, see if you can bring it back to the tummy and that inward and outward movement. Now I'm just going to leave a brief pause so we can practice this in silence as best we can. So just for a few moments, I'll just leave a pause for us to practice. Okay, so thank you very much. I'm going to start to bring this exercise to a close. So very gently, if you've had your eyes closed or unfocused, just bring the focus back, have a look around you, let the light back in. Look around wherever you are. Maybe have a bit of a stretch, give your body a bit of a wiggle because it's been still for a while. Stand up if you want. But yeah, that was a little experience of what we call a guided meditation. And it's another way. We've covered several different ways, but it's another way to develop this skill. So I'm curious, what was that like? Has anyone got any feedback they'd be willing to share about that experience? How did you find it? What was
We've
it
got
like?
a couple of things coming up in the chat relating to talking about mindfulness, and I used to think it was nonsense, but the last few years I've realized the benefits and often do the mindfulness exercises.
Right.
I discovered mindfulness during pregnancy as part of hypnobirthing, and it's changed everything.
Wow.
I do this exercise every morning. I drifted off when I moved from one part of the body to another. And hard at first not to get distracted, but really liked it, made me feel relaxed.
Wow, thanks for sharing, folks.
Oh, and some more
keep it coming, as well. Yes, please.
It's really calming, and I love doing it after yoga. Very relaxing. And I definitely noticed the baby's movements a lot more than I normally would at this time.
Wow, I'm taking that's not you speaking there, Will.
That's not me. I'm throwing it all out there from everywhere else. Oh, it's difficult to focus, but focusing on the breathing really helps.
Nice.
Great.
Brilliant. Thanks, folks, for all your feedback, because it really resonates with me. I see some of you have discovered it. Maybe you're a bit cynical at first, but have discovered it, and now it's part of your routine. Those of you perhaps thinking, not sure, I'd encourage you, if you're willing to explore it a bit, using any of the techniques we've played with. And someone said they felt quite relaxed, and I'll take that as a win. But I also want you to know that sometimes when you practice an exercise like this, you might notice things that aren't so relaxing. You might notice an ache in your body or a pain, or you might notice some distress or some uncomfortable thoughts. So it won't always be relaxing. And sometimes people say to me, oh, my mind wandered 15 times during that little practice. I'm really rubbish at this. Well, actually, I say, no, if your mind wandered 50 times during that practice, that's a great practice because you noticed 50 times. For those of you who go to the gym, let me try and explain what I'm on about. So if you go to the gym and you'll imagine I'm lifting a weight in this arm. And the more, I believe you call them reps, as you appreciate, I don't go to the gym, but the more reps I do, this gun here gets bigger. And the more reps I do, the more effective that muscle becomes. So when your mind wanders and you bring it back, your mind wanders and you bring it back, your mind wanders and you bring it back, you're really developing this mental muscle, this skill of noticing. So don't be despondent if you do find that your mind wanders a lot, because that's really the core of what we're developing. So this skill of noticing, it's like being a curious observer of what's going on in our minds. And it's taking that stance of being non-judgmental, because we can get quite judgy about what's going on. So we've been exploring this skill of noticing, and that's given you a bit of an insight into the practical ways you can develop the skill of noticing. So let's have a bit of a recap. We tried to build a case on why it's useful to develop the skill of noticing, and the good news is we can develop it. And then we explored various ways to connect to the present moment and build a skill, including bringing our awareness to activities on autopilot. So give it a go in the shower or when you're making a cup of tea or coffee, feeling the kettle boil, noticing the sound, feeling the warmth of the cup, the smell of the drink, using our 5 senses, using beginner's mind and practicing mindfulness through a guided meditation. So we've had a go at all of those. And as I said at the beginning, you'll get a copy of these slides and a recording if you want to have a recap. And I've also got some resources I want to share with you as well. But before I do that, we'd like to check in and see what you thought of this workshop. This is the first time I've certainly done workshops with you all. So me and Will would like to know how was it for you? So I've got another poll, and let me see if I can get the right one up this time. So the poll, checking in with you folks, if you're willing to share. Oh. Hang on a sec, I need to just start that again. This is a new feature of Zoom, folks, and relaunch poll, excuse me. Right. How useful did you find this workshop? I got there in the end. So if you're willing to share how useful you found it, please be honest. We want these to be as useful to you as possible. Thank you for sharing, folks. And I'll share the results with you as well, so we can be absolutely open. Okay, thank you. And I've got another question to follow, but let me show you the results of this one first. So 64% found it very useful, 29% quite useful, and 7% moderately useful. So not too shabby, I would suggest.
Yeah, I'll take that for our first one, Ross.
Yeah.
Taking it.
And another question, if we may. Let me just launch this poll. How likely would you be to recommend this workshop to a colleague? And you've got choices of very likely, quite likely, moderately likely, not that likely, or unlikely. Thanks very much for sharing, folks. Right. Let's end the poll and we'll show you the results because we like to be open. So we have 71% very likely, 29% quite likely. Well, thank you so much for feeding back. And if you've got any other feedback on this particular workshop, I'm going to suggest people contact you, Will, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Please do send any comments or anything that you want to say. You can pop things in the chat if you want it to be open in that way, or send me emails. Thanks all for joining us and for the feedback. Obviously, the word of mouth thing is kind of important because, as you know, most of these sessions are going to be, they're not mandatory for everyone, and some people are only going to come to one or two. So I do encourage you, if you did get anything out of it, to try and access the other workshops as well, because we've started building the toolbox, and you might have found that from today you've found 1 or 2 tools. For me, the senses and the beginner's mind is so much more valuable for me than something like a guided meditation, but you might find what works for you. And each workshop, we will be giving you more and more of those tools for your own personal toolbox. So yeah, please do come and join us again. Yes, in the chat, we've got the PowerPoint. Will the exercises be available? So yeah, so all the PowerPoints themselves will be available in PDF form. We can also give you sort of more detailed versions of the exercises if you want them in written form. I can organise that, or you've obviously got the recordings as well, so you can obviously come back and practice with Ross live on the recordings if that helps.
And we've got some resources as well that we wanted to share, so let me just talk you through them. So I mentioned there's some really good apps for that meditation thing, if that's your bag. There's some free stuff there from Finding Peace in a Frantic World, a really famous mindfulness book. There's apps like Headspace, Calm, Buddhify, and Waking Up. And there's some free meditations there from Buddhify, including some for kids, which some people found really useful. There's a recording from me, a body and breath exercise, if you want to have a go at that, if you can tolerate my voice. There's a great little video here, which I think is quite thought-provoking, a 2-minute video on why mindfulness is a superpower. For those of you who like books, there's a few books there. I really like The Art of Breathing. I think it's a really great, accessible book. And there's a couple of others there. And I wanted to finish with a quote, because I think noticing what's going on in the present moment without judgment can be a really difficult thing to do. And this fella here, this fella called Tim Galway, really sums it up for me. And it's like when we're learning a new skill or developing something. And Tim Galway said, when we plant a rose seed in the earth, we notice that it is small, but we don't criticize it as rootless and stemless. We treat it as a seed, giving it the water and nourishment required of a seed. And the quote goes on. It's a bit of a long quote, but I wanted to share the whole thing with you. When it first shoots up out of the earth, we don't condemn it as immature and underdeveloped, nor do we criticize the buds for not being open when they appear. We stand in wonder at the process taking place and give the plant the care it needs at each stage of its development. The rose is a rose from the time it is a seed to the time it dies. Within it, at all times, it contains its whole potential. It seems to be constantly in the process of change, yet at each state, at each moment, it is perfectly all right as it is. And that speaks to me, that quote, how sometimes if we're learning a new skill or doing something different in our lives, we can get critical of ourselves or each other. And just know that everything's fine as it is when we're in the process of change. So folks, I think I'm going to stop sharing just for a moment to say thank you so much for all your engagement, your energy. It's been fantastic to interact with you all and hear your reflections and insights. This afternoon at 1:30, we have purpose, exploring your purpose at work and your wider lives. So if you can join us, and if you found this useful, we'd love to see you again. But for now, I think we'll call it a morning. And let's say thank you to Will for being such a marvelous co-pilot. And most of all, thank you to you all for joining us. So thanks, folks, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Ross, and thanks everyone, and thanks for your messages on the chat as well. Hopefully see you guys this afternoon. Cheers.